America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you live every week, and today I'm going to talk about Christian Zionism. And I say this because the Speaker of the House right now, the U.S. Speaker of the House, is a Christian Zionist, self-avowed. He was just given a recent interview where he said that if you are a Christian, or if you believe what I do, I'm going to paraphrase the quote, if you're a good Christian, then you heed the Lord's admonition, which is a command, to support Israel, right? So what it means to be a good Christian is to support Israel, which is interesting because what it means to support Israel is up to the Israelis, right? So here's a deal where the Israelis get to decide U.S. policy more than, U.S. citizens do in debate, because our job is to support Israel, whatever Israel decides, and it's Israel's job to decide what they want to do. Right. So the people within Israel get to decide how to spend U.S. money more than get to debate and actually engage into the intellectual democratic process and deliberative process of how to decide how to spend the U.S.'s money rather than the people in the United States. Because whatever Israel decides, we have to fund. But what Israel decides is up to the internal debate within Israel. And I think that that's a problem. That's a problem. It's funny because this nationalist side, this Christian national side of the United States, is often, the realist side or the national side where we need to think of American interests first. But apparently America's cultural interests and America's religious interests is supporting Israel, whatever Israel decides its interests are. And that's the problem, right? So you can have the secular nationalists who say that, well, United States need to think about United States first. And then you can have the religious nationalists who say that United States is a Christian nation. And as a Christian nation, we have to do whatever it is. We have to support Israel, whatever Israel wants to do. And that's two different varieties of nationalism. If that's one that's inflected by a certain variety of Christianity, and the other that's inflected, that's agnostic. And so, insofar as I am a nationalist, I think America's duty and American citizens should think about what the responsibilities we have to Americans first. I do not think that the responsibilities that we have to Americans first includes fealty to Israel, right? And so here's how Christian nationalism has always kind of been a problem for America. And we haven't reconstructed it, so it's always been a problem since Reconstruction, right? So that was the same Christian nationalists who sold that America is a Christian nation, and what it meant to be a Christian nation is to treat black people like garbage. Or like second-class citizens, or like second-class Christians, or in Utah, children in the eyes of God. You could have it a different way depending on what variety of Christian nationalism you founded, but it was always nationalism with the understanding that the Christian nationalism rendered black people second-class citizens and rendered the proper Christians and the proper Christian nationalists white ones. Right. And we didn't reconstruct that Christianity, so that kind of Christianity still survived in the Southern Baptist Church or the bad Presbyterian Church, and all of the schisms that happened in the late 19th and early 20th centuries between the churches who wanted to overtly treat black people poorly and the churches who didn't want to overtly treat the white churches who didn't want to overtly treat black people as lesser in the eyes of God. Right? And a lot of this comes down to what it meant to love thy neighbor, because if loving thy neighbor actually meant securing justice and healthcare, roads, schools, all that stuff for black people, that wasn't really consistent with loving thy neighbor. If loving thy neighbor was being kind to those of degenerate black people, then white Christian nationalists love that because they like being kind to degenerates. They're very good with the mentally handicapped people and mentally disabled population as a matter of their Christian fealty, and the same with the blacks who are obviously damned. They're very good with them, but they're not about to try to share power or be equals in that more meaningful way. And depending on how you conceive of what it means to love your neighbor, loving your neighbor means, making sure that neighbor has a good job, healthcare, roads, schools, all that stuff. And I'm not sure how you can be a good Christian and be indifferent to your neighbor's, water, the lead in your neighbor's water. So that's how an unreconstructed Christian nationalism, since it's unreconstructed, it has all of these kind of dubious commitments to the degradation of black people and the fealty to Israel, which is a whole other nation over there. If they can't support themselves, that's an Israel problem. That's an Israel problem. Maybe the nation shouldn't. If they can't support themselves without apartheid, then that's an Israel problem that needs to be meted out, and negotiated over there. And if that means Israel is not going to exist as a Jewish state, that's fine for them over there. And you have to understand that these Christian nationalists, one reason they like Israel as a Jewish state that needs to be supported is because if Jewish people in the United States ever get a little bit too uppity for them, they want to reserve the right to say that you can always go over there. This is a white Christian nation, and you could always go over there. So that's a problem with Christian nationalism that's kind of under the surface. They want Israel to be a Jewish nation. They believe in nation states, number one. Ethno-nation states, ethno-states, number one. But they also want Israel to be the Jewish ethno-state so that if, for some reason, Jews get uppity here, they feel very comfortable saying, well, you have to go over there. Or it's okay that we have white Christian dominance in the United States because in a pinch, you could always get your institutions over there with your people. And we support. These same people will be for something like HBCUs. As long as HBCUs don't challenge white Christian dominance. Right? They'll be for HBCUs and they'll be like, well, so we don't have to open up the gates to our good public schools because we will support you going to school over there. Especially if you going to school over there is never going to challenge our entitlements here. Right? Which is one reason why, one, Booker T. Washington was so popular, and two, why HBCUs don't really produce revolutionaries in the way that I think they should. All right, so be wary of Christian nationalists. Because they have always been a problem. Because their variety of Christianity screws up their variety of what it is to be a nation state. Right? It first screwed it up with race, screws it up with gender, and now it screws it up with fealty to Israel. And you have to watch out because I don't think Israel's policy should decide where American tax dollars go. But if we are going to commit to Israel whatever Israel wants because it's a biblical admonition, as Johnson said, then that's going to be a problem for our own autonomy. If we can't say no to Israel, we are not autonomous. If we can't, here's a little, it's funny. I had Batya Ungasagan on the show and I had to explain this to her. Complicated issue with Batya. But if autonomy is being able to say no to people with plans on your activity, if someone else has plans on your activity and Israel has plans, designs on U.S. guns and money, and we can't say no to them, then we are not autonomous. We work for them. If you can't say no to other people who have plans and designs on your activity, then you are not autonomous. You work for them. And I do not think that Americans should work for Israelis. I do not think that we should be a client state. I do not think that we should be colonized with Israel as a colonizer, the intellectual colonizer, because they get to debate Israeli policy. Apparently, we can't. If we're going to be good Americans or good Christians, we just have to support Israel no matter what with our dollars and money, time and treasure. And I do not think that that's appropriate. And Speaker Johnson thinks it is appropriate because it's our duties as Christians to support Israel. I think that's a problem for democracy. Not just the separation of, it's a problem for, it's not just a separation of church and state. It's a problem of democratic governance, insofar as a foreign state is now determined to dictate American policy and priorities. So I have a problem with that. If you appreciate what I'm thinking and saying, remember, what I'm saying is not exactly conducive to quality of livelihood I'd like to sustain for my family. So go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, because depending on who you talk to, what I say is either anti-Semitic. And I say things like, for example, everyday normal Jews go to a synagogue and are taught fealty to Israel. Everyday normal, non-radical, like regular people are taught fealty to Israel in a way that I think is unbecoming. Like the planting trees and all of that, I think it's unbecoming. Right? I think property rights and religious commitments need to be separated in a way that are not separated in the United States. And they're not separated in the United States because a lot of churches own a lot of properties. They don't tell you this, especially like the big white ones. They also own like land and farms. Heck, the Mormons might own like an entire state and just not tell anybody. And that state might not even be Utah. It might be Idaho. Like they just don't tell anybody. So there shouldn't be such property commitments and property holdings that are controlled by churches. And, Israel is a great example of what happens when you mix property holdings and religious commitments, because you can tell some people will tell you that Israel is a democracy, but it's actually a theocracy with elections. And it's a theocracy with elections because religion determines immigration policy and religion determines property holdings, right? And governments determine immigration. If you can't determine immigration policy and you can't secure property rights and disputes, then you're not really in charge of your government. Whatever entity is determining immigration policy and whatever entity is determining property disputes is actually doing the work of government. Because state-controlled immigration through a democratic process and state-controlled the property disputes and adjudication through a democratic process is a part of, democratic governance. If you don't have that, then who's ever running your immigration policy and who's ever running your property dispute policy is actually running your government. And in Israel, that's run by the religion. The religion decides who gets to be an Israeli, and the religion decides what goes on with property. So that's a theocracy dressed up with kind of democratic accoutrement. So in Israel, you don't have a democracy. Anybody who tells you it's a Western democracy, it's not. It's not a democracy. It's a theocracy with elections. But, and that kind of insight is why you should go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, $50 a month. And I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. All right, take care. I will see you next time. Peace.